This is the story of how being the invisible daughter became my greatest advantage. My mother spent 25 years telling the world that my brother was the crown jewel of our family, while I was just the setting he sat in. She spent millions on his failures, while I worked in the shadows to build the very walls she slept within. She thought she had rigged the game so that I would spend my life serving his legacy. She was wrong. By the time the ink was dry on my father's final testament, I didn't just have a seat at the table, I owned the house, the table, and the chair she was sitting in. If you love stories where the underdog finally gets the last laugh and justice is served in the most cold, calculated way, make sure to subscribe right now and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next. My name is Jane. My brother's name is Sebastian. In our mother Beatrice's eyes, the names alone told the story. Sebastian was a name for a king, for a leader, for a golden child. Jane was just Jane. Growing up in our estate in Connecticut was like living in a theater where only one actor ever got the spotlight. My father, Arthur, was a titan in the shipping industry, a man of silence and ledgers. My mother, however, was a woman of optics. To her, the family wasn't a group of people, it was a brand, and Sebastian was the face of that brand. I remember my 10th birthday. I had asked for a simple telescope. I wanted to see the stars, to look at something that didn't care about our family name. On the morning of my birthday, there was one small box at the end of the table. Inside was a book on basic accounting. A practical gift for a practical boy, my mother said, not looking up from her coffee. 2 weeks later, it was Sebastian's birthday. The driveway was blocked by a custom-built, miniature, gas-powered race car. He was 8. He couldn't even reach the pedals properly, but Beatrice had a photographer there to capture the prodigy at the wheel. "Jane," she had whispered to me while the flashes went off, "make sure you take the car to the shed and wipe the tire marks off the driveway. We don't want the estate looking messy." That was my life. Sebastian broke things, I fixed them. Sebastian spent money, I tracked it. Sebastian was the visionary, I was the maintenance. As we grew older, the gap only widened. Sebastian was sent to elite boarding schools where my mother paid off the deans every time he was caught drinking or failing a mock exam. I was sent to a local preparatory school with a strict military curriculum because Beatrice thought it would build character, and because it was significantly cheaper. By the time we reached our 20s, Sebastian was a venture capitalist, which was Beatrice's way of saying he took $5 million loans from my father to invest in failed nightclubs and luxury sock subscriptions. I, on the other hand, had worked my way through a dual degree in law and forensic accounting. I didn't ask for a loan. I didn't ask for a seat in the family firm. In fact, I did something my mother found utterly baffling. I got a job at the very firm my father owned, but I applied as Jane Miller, using my grandmother's maiden name, and started in the compliance department. My father knew. Arthur wasn't a warm man, but he was a shark. He saw what I was doing. For 3 years, I sat in the basement of Thorn Shipping, auditing the books that were funding my brother's champagne lifestyle. I saw the rot before anyone else did. I saw how Sebastian was bleeding the secondary holdings dry, and how my mother was forging my father's initials on internal transfers to cover Sebastian's gambling debts in Macau. I didn't say a word. I just filed the documents. I waited. The turning point came 2 years ago. My father's heart finally gave out. The house was filled with the smell of lilies and the sound of Beatrice's performative sobbing. She was already wearing custom black silk before the body was even cold. The night after the funeral, Beatrice called a family meeting in the library. She sat in my father's leather chair, Sebastian lounging next to her, smelling of expensive bourbon and indifference. "Jane," she said, tapping a polished nail on a folder, "now that your father has passed, we need to ensure the legacy continues. Sebastian will, of course, be taking over the CEO position at Thorn Shipping. It's what the world expects. It's what the name requires." Sebastian smirked. "I'm thinking of rebranding, Jules. Thorn & Co. sounds a bit dusty. Maybe just Thorn, all caps. Very modern." I looked at them both. "And my role?" Beatrice sighed, as if the very question was an exhaustion. "You've always been good with the details. You'll stay on as a junior consultant. You'll make sure the paperwork is handled so Sebastian can focus on the big picture. We've already drafted the new will and the corporate restructuring. You'll receive a modest yearly stipend, provided you remain loyal to your brother's leadership." "A stipend," I repeated. "And the estate?" "The estate stays with the CEO," she said firmly. "Sebastian needs a place to entertain. You can keep your apartment in the city. It's practical. Like you." I stood up. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I simply nodded. "I understand perfectly." But here is what they didn't know. My father, in the final months of his life, had realized that Sebastian was a black hole and Beatrice was the event horizon. He had come to my office, the small, windowless one in the basement of his own company, and sat across from Jane Miller. "You've been tracking the Macau transfers," he had said. "I have," I replied. "And the forged signatures on the Cayman accounts?" 3 years' worth, Dad." He had looked at me then, not with love, but with something better. Respect. "They think you're the setting, Jane, but you're the one holding the stone in place. If you let go, it falls. I'm going to give you the choice to let go." We spent that night drafting a very specific set of codicils. My father didn't leave me the money directly. That would have been too easy for Beatrice to contest in court. Instead, he left the entire estate and the controlling interest of Thorn Shipping to a holding company called the Gray Pillar. And who owned the Gray Pillar? An anonymous trust. And who was the sole trustee with the power to appoint the beneficiary based on demonstrated fiscal responsibility and corporate stewardship over a 5-year period? Me. But the trap wasn't just the trust. The trap was the debt. For 2 years after my father's death, I let Sebastian play king. I watched as he rebranded. I watched as he took out massive personal loans against his expected inheritance to buy a yacht and a fleet of cars. I watched as Beatrice sold off my father's private art collection to fund a lifestyle she couldn't afford. I was the junior consultant. I was the one who processed the paperwork. I made sure every loan they took out was secured by their future interest in the Thorn estate. I made sure the interest rates were predatory, tucked away in the fine print of the Thorn Family Private Fund, which, unbeknownst to them, was now a subsidiary of the Gray Pillar. The day of reckoning arrived on the 5th anniversary of my father's demonstrated stewardship clause. I arrived at the estate. The lawn was poorly kept. Sebastian had fired the veteran gardeners to save money for a private chef. Beatrice was in the sunroom, looking stressed. The bills were finally starting to outpace the forgeries. "Jane, thank God you're here," she said, not even greeting me. "The bank sent a very rude letter about the mortgage on the Aspen house. Tell them to talk to the firm's accountants." "The firm's accountants are busy, Mother," I said, taking a seat. "They're currently processing the dissolution of Thorn Shipping." She froze. "What did you say?" Sebastian walked in, his face flushed. "Jules, what is this? My corporate card was declined at the dealership. Fix it." I pulled a single heavy envelope from my bag. "I'm afraid I can't fix it, Sebastian. You see, today is the 5-year review of the Thorn Trust." "The what?" Sebastian sneered. "Dad left the company to us, Mom said so." "Dad left the company to a trust," I corrected him. "A trust that required the heirs to demonstrate they wouldn't destroy a 60-year-old legacy in under a decade. Over the last 5 years, Sebastian, you have lost 40% of the firm's market share. You have defaulted on 3 major shipping contracts. And Mother, you have borrowed nearly $12 million from the Employee Pension Fund, which, by the way, is a federal crime." Beatrice turned white. How do you know about that?" "I'm the one who's been auditing you," I said calmly. "As the sole trustee of the Gray Pillar, I have reviewed the stewardship of the Thorn assets. I've found both of you lacking." "You're the trustee?" Sebastian stepped toward me, his fists clenched. "That's impossible. You're the backup. You're the nothing." "I'm the owner," I said, and for the first time in my life, I let the power show in my voice. "As of 8 o'clock this morning, the Gray Pillar has called in all outstanding loans secured by your personal interests. Since you cannot pay, the trust has seized your shares, your homes, and your remaining bank accounts." "You can't do this," Beatrice screamed. "I'm your mother. This is my house." "Actually," I said, standing up and looking around the sunroom, "it's my house, and I don't like the way you've decorated. You have 3 hours to pack your personal belongings. The cars, however, stay. They were bought with company funds you misappropriated." "You're leaving us with nothing?" Sebastian gasped. "We're family." I looked at him, the golden child who had never worked a day in his life, who had mocked me for 20 years while I cleaned up his messes. "No, Sebastian, I'm leaving you with exactly what you've earned. You have your Thorn brand. You have your vision. Go see what that gets you on the open market." I turned to my mother. Her eyes were full of a terrifying realization. She wasn't looking at the invisible daughter anymore. She was looking at the woman who had outplayed her at her own game. "Jane," she whispered, her voice trembling, "please, we can talk about this. You can be the CEO. We'll do whatever you want." "What I want is for the setting to finally be more important than the stone." I walked out of the sunroom and down the long hallway of the estate. I didn't feel a surge of joy. I felt a profound sense of peace. The house was quiet. The theater was closed. The spotlight was finally, mercifully, turned off. As I reached the front door, I saw the book on accounting I'd been given as a child, still sitting on a shelf in the library, dusty and ignored. I picked it up and tucked it under my arm. It had been a practical gift, after all. It had taught me exactly how to count everything they were about to lose. If you enjoyed this story of the neglected child finally taking control, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments. Would you have been as cold as Jane, or would you have given them a second chance? Subscribe for more stories where the truth always comes to light.